G'day everybody and welcome back to the channel. Okay, so today we're going to talk about that right there. That is the Fischer Fischer SN470m loudspeaker. So they have been in my room now for a couple of weeks, and I've been putting them through their paces. I've been walking you guys through that whole process as well. So you guys have heard them bi-amped, you've heard them with the Rotel Michi driving them, and you've also heard the Vitus monoblocks running them, and the combination with the Vitus and the Wilson Watchdog subwoofer also in play up until recently. My final thoughts on the Fischer Fischer SN470m loudspeaker. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this speaker's construction, because it is a pretty impressive thing. It's made from slate. Now, slate is Mother Nature's version of constrained dampened layering. You can imagine 500 million years ago, so before human beings existed on this planet, before dinosaurs, before much existed on this planet at all, weather patterns were completely different to what they are these days, and essentially we had a cataclysmic event, a rainstorm, a huge landslide, topsoil being washed down a mountain, and that mountain's topsoil would settle, it would dry over subsequent years, and this would continue to happen many thousands and tens of thousands and millions of years. This would happen, this layering effect after the next rainstorm and after the next one, and so on and so forth, and eventually topsoil would form over the top of this, and this, what was once the surface of the planet, would certainly then be overrun by more changes in the surface of the planet over millions of years. And of course this pressure builds then on these layers, and about 500 feet down or thereabouts under the ground now, which once upon a time was the surface of the earth, Fischer Fischer have been cutting this material out of their mine. So that is essentially what slate is. It is a series of rainstorms and cataclysmic events that are literally almost frozen in time. As I said, layer upon layer upon layer under extreme amounts of pressure create this constrained dampened layering effect. And that's what the cabinet's made out of. So it is extremely inert. It literally does not ring. It doesn't impart a cabinet response that I can certainly hear. All you really are hearing are the drivers, mounted very solidly, I might add, beautifully constructed cabinets. I mean, they are stunning to look at, these things, and there's not a fault. I've gone right over them as part of my review, and there is just absolutely no fault with any aspect of the build quality of these speakers. They are first class. The way the drivers are mounted on the plate on the front baffle is absolutely gapless. There's no issues with anything. Everything just looks absolutely perfect. So it really is a marvelously constructed loudspeaker. The billet aluminium outriggers are beautifully constructed and built as well. Really is a high quality build. So that being said, and going through my take on how slate is formed, we have this loudspeaker over here. We've got an air motion transducer by Marndorf in this speaker system, and we've got carefully selected bass drivers and mid-range speakers that Fischer Fischer have selected to put into their loudspeakers. So this is a 2.5-way speaker system. So we've got two 6-inch bass drivers. We have the Marndorf air motion transducer as the tweeter, and we have the dipole mid-range at the top. So there is a port. I'll do some B-roll and I'll walk you around that as part of this review. So that the top speaker is its mid-range, and it has it's a dipole arrangement. So it has a port directly behind it at the back. It's straight through. So these speakers really rely on correct placement. Now, let's talk about image for a start. I plonked these speakers down essentially in my zone of neutrality in my room where my Wilsons were, and they imaged their heads off immediately. They really did produce a wonderful image scape across the soundstage. I was very, very impressed with that. But one thing I noticed in that original, sat them down on front baffle to front baffle in line with the green tape on my floor here that you guys would be seeing lately, I noticed that the mid bass and bass was a little anemic. It sounded light on for a speaker of this size. I also really wasn't getting that projection in the mid-range. I suspected what was going on was I wasn't hearing the back wave off the front wall in relation to the mid-range. So these are front bass ported, so they're a little less fussy about how far back into the front wall they go. Within reason, of course, there is the dipole port at the back for the mid-range, and that is quite critical, as I had found out. So over the first 3 or 4 days, I was tweaking and fine-tuning and readjusting to get these voiced into the room properly, because even though they were very good, these were the things I was noticing. And when I really put some current through them with my Vitus monoblocks, I noticed in their original position, they sort of all of a sudden got a little bit tipped up, a little bit shouty, and a little bit overemphasized in the upper frequencies. So I thought, right, so I need to get the front baffle a little bit further away from my listening position. I also need to open up that rear wave that comes off the dipole mid-range and get that reflection off my front wall. So by going back, I think I went back probably about 12 or 13 inches or 30 to 40 centimeters from their original position. And a few things that I suspected would happen actually did happen. The mid-range, that etherealness of that dipole mid-range really opened up, because I was getting that back wave off the front wall and hearing it from my listening position. So the mid-range all of a sudden picked up. The upper frequencies backed off that little bit more, which was quite pleasant and nice as well. Essentially what happened is everything sort of came back into balance. And I was really quite impressed with that. The mid bass and lower bass register was also improved by going back into the corner, because obviously bass, as we know, propagates into 3 corners. So the floor, the roof, and the 2 walls. So getting that speaker back into that corner will help with a bit of room loading, and these speakers certainly benefited from being back into the corner a little bit. So if we measure this off the front wall to the back of the speaker, I'm about 870 millimeters. So you would say front baffle to the wall probably around 1 meter or 1,000 millimeters, and I think that's pretty good. So 3 feet, depending on where you are in the world. So that, I think, is about the right position. But of course, this needs to be said. Every room is going to be different. So please take the time to voice these, because as much as when you sit them in the room and play them, a lot of people are giving me feedback that they're not fussy in regards to their placement. I would agree in some regards to that, but I would disagree in others. I think that if you spend the time and voice these speakers correctly to your room and to your tastes, you will get them really locked in, and you will get that extra 10% out of the speaker in relation to just plonking them back where the speakers you're replacing them were. So that, and certainly every speaker is going to perform differently in your listening room, and so every speaker deserves its opportunity to be able to be voiced correctly in that room to give you, and these are absolutely certainly need that to get that really lovely dipole mid-range engagement, which with the adjustments I made about 3 or 4 adjustments over the first couple of days, and where they are now is where they absolutely sounded the best. Now, I've heard these speakers in more open environments, in probably less treated rooms than my room for acoustic treatment, and this is as good as I've ever heard them sound. In this room, in that position, they were doing everything I would expect from a speaker like this, that has a dipole mid-range. I was really getting, once they were locked in, I was really getting all of the specialness that this speaker can provide to your listening experience. So that being said, I then went on to starting to play some of my test tracks, and I started engaging with different configurations after I went through about 30 test tracks. When they do have a bit of current push through them, which was one thing that I was very interested, because generally I've heard these speakers with low wattage valve amplifiers, and they are a relatively sensitive speaker, so they don't need a lot of current to get them really going, but putting some really lovely solid state pure class A amplification through them in the form of my Vitus amplifiers was very interesting to me, and it was a way I hadn't heard them. And I think after hearing them that way with the amplifiers, as I started to poke a bit of current through them and push them, I still did notice that they tipped up a little bit in the upper frequency. Now, I'm going to say this from the very start, and this doesn't necessarily mean that this is a bad thing and it's something that you should rule out. But I am not the biggest fan of air motion transducers. I much prefer, and these are my tastes, a silk dome tweeter as handling the upper frequencies. Obviously my Wilsons have a silk dome tweeter, and I just prefer that presentation. I'm not saying that these were bad, because they are far from bad. This is by far and away the best application of an air motion transducer I have ever heard in a speaker. So that is a very important point to make here, and a lot of you will love the presentation here, and I loved it as well. I just prefer a silk dome tweeter handling the upper frequencies. It just has that warmth at the top end. It loses any bite, anything that may become offensive, and these certainly never became offensive. I just did notice that they tipped up a little bit when they had probably a good deal of current pushed into the back of them. And whilst that was never offensive in any way, shape or form, I've really enjoyed having these in the room. That was something that, for the balance of neutrality here in this review, I would mention. But in saying that, I really am splitting hairs here, guys. I am not saying that they were offensive or etched or bright or fatiguing in any way, because they weren't. And the other thing, that mid-range dipole tunability, you must tune that correctly for your room. And I can't give you a formula here. It's trial and error. You're going to have to, if you're buying these, you're going to have to set them up correctly, because by getting that right, these speakers really do open up, and they get back their meat. They get back, their heft in that mid-range vocal area. When I got that dipole arrangement, that rear port off the front wall really worked out properly. Oh, it was a really big difference. We went from a relatively anemic presentation to something that really did light the room up. And on that mid-range, when you do get it right and you get that back wave working properly, you get vocal dimension. So the sorts of things that I was hearing when it was locked in, and that's why I really urge you guys to, if you do have these, or you are considering buying them, that you take the time and get them locked in, because the sorts of things you're going to notice is dimensionality in the sound stage. So vocals are going to feel like they're sitting in front of the presentation, or if the recording has a vocal in the rear of the recording, you will hear that as well. What you essentially are doing is focusing these things in so that they give you everything that's in the recording. But if they're in the wrong spot, you will miss some of that. Now, I'm not talking about it being a night and day difference, but it is certainly enough of a difference that you should spend the time to get them focused in and get them voiced correctly. I mean, I do that with any speaker, but in this case, I noticed more than a lot of others I've had in the room, they really did benefit from having that voicing. So that was certainly something I loved. The other thing that I loved was the tonal accuracy of the lower octave. These things make quite good bass for their size, given they have two 6-inch bass drivers in them. They're well designed. They were able to create great tonal accuracy in the room. They go down to 35 hertz on paper, but I was getting an in-room response when I measured them of 28 hertz. So they were getting down to really good lower octave presentation. The only thing was, it did feel when I got down underneath the paper figure that they lost a bit of energy. They just didn't quite project like they did at, say, 35 hertz, which would stand a reason. But I was certainly able to hear 28 hertz in the room here, and that was really lovely. I will say this though, they do benefit from having a subwoofer coupled to them. Most of you, I think, heard the difference when the Watchdog was in play, and from sitting in the room here, they were certainly improved by having the subwoofer in the mix. Whilst they do a great job in what is a fairly well acoustically treated room, they only benefited from having a subwoofer. In fact, a properly integrated subwoofer in any speaker system, up to some of the really, really big guys, I've never heard a speaker not benefit from having a well integrated sub or subs in the mix, and this was no exception. This speaker here improved further by having that a good quality lower octave presentation with the subwoofer engaged to help them along. But certainly they were no slouch in the bass department. Again, I really have to balance this up. I'm just giving you full transparency here in relation to how I found them, and with all the experimentation that I did, so that I could actually talk to you guys about all the things that happened in the room, what I did. I've spent a lot of time with these in the last 2 weeks. I've listened to probably at least 30 hours of music, maybe even more. And these are a run-in pair of speakers as well. These were the actual speaker that was in the Hey Now Hi-Fi room at the Melbourne Hi-Fi show. These very speakers, they are absolutely run-in. They won Best in Show. That presentation won Best in Show for my awards at the Melbourne Hi-Fi show last year in October. And they've been in Jeff's showroom, and he's been demoing them between then and now me having them. So there's no more run-in to do here. They are absolutely feel free and quick and lots of life in them. Certainly not feeling uptight or at all restricted in any way. They benefited from having the Vitus running them. In regards to how I favoured the presentation, I think the best without a subwoofer was when I bi-amped them. So I had the Rotel Michi running the lower octave, the bass drivers, and I had the Vitus monos running the tweeter and the mid-range. It's certainly overkill. I know you guys are going to be thinking, crikey, he's going to put like $100,000 worth of amplifiers, against in this country, a $38,000 to $40,000 pair of speakers. I know that, but it's what I have in the room, and I judge them on what I have in the room. My equipment is very, very neutral. It doesn't impart any of its own flavour on a piece of equipment I bring in. So when I hear something I bring into the room, I can clearly pick up straight away, after referring to my reference system, what's changed. Now, that leads me on to the next point. Quite a few of you have asked me, how do they compare to the Alexias? It's not a fair fight. I have to say that right now. This is a $40,000 pair of speakers, and brilliant as they are, the Alexias are $120,000 a pair. They're not, it's unfair to compare them. So I simply will say no more than that. They are, what I will say about the Fischer and Fischers is that I think they're great value for what you get. The cabinet work is essentially a work of art. I could look at that slate and imagine the rain and the millions and millions of years it took to form that material. It just takes me on a bit of a David Attenborough adventure when I sit there and think about what took place, and if they could only speak, what they have seen over those millions and millions of years. It just made my imagination run away with me, and I just think that it is a brilliant material. They are a brilliant pair of speakers. They do everything you could want a speaker like this to do. They have lovely detail and air. They are quick in the upper frequency. The mid-range is very faithful to the recordings. The bass is lovely and tonally accurate, which was a really lovely surprise. Of course, the bass is quite fast in these as well because they're a 6-inch driver. So to be able to get that kind of in-room response from a 6-inch woofer only says just what Fischer & Fischer are doing in their design to create a speaker that's able to perform to that level of accuracy and that span of frequency response in a given listening room. I get to hear the speaker, I get to hear the system without the room interacting. And I've done everything around this room to make sure I'm not hearing the room react to what I'm listening to. So all that being said, guys, it is a lovely speaker. I'll leave a link to Hey Now Hi-Fi in the description below this video. If you're in Australia, of course, reach out to Jeff at Hey Now Hi-Fi. We will only be too happy to help you with these and demo them for you so you guys can have a listen for yourself. But they certainly get a thumbs up from me. I as I said in my balanced review, there are a couple of things about them that need work when you get them. That's the only thing. If they had a silk dome tweeter in the middle of them, I think I'd be doing cartwheels as opposed to the AMT. But I'm not talking a bad thing there at all. Just a taste thing more than anything else.
Okay, here's a good look at this speaker. Have a look at the texture finish on the top of the slate there, on the top of the speaker. Just beautiful looking speakers. The beautiful beveled edges, the layering. Look at the layering there. Just stunning. All those rainstorms over those millions of years. Look at the color changes here in the slate. Just the different textures of the slate, and its imperfections are quite stunning. Veining and texture changes all the way down this right side of the speaker. There's the outriggers you can see just there at the bottom, and again more color changes down near where the outriggers are. And let's move around and have a look at the front. Now here's the front baffle. Now it is a fully machined front baffle, so no texture there, but that doesn't excuse the color changes that are in the slate. They look like a smudge mark across the top there, but that's actually all in the slate. There is the mid-range speaker, the air motion transducer there, a nice little close-up of that, and the logo there, Fischer & Fischer, on this beautiful aluminium mounting plate. There are the bass units, and again, look at that lovely layering in there, and not a gap to be seen. Beautiful fit and finish on these speakers. And we move down toward the port. It's a front firing bass port there. And again, look at that color change on the machined front baffle. Just beautiful work. The whole thing's just not anything to fault here at all. And you can see some more texture down the other side of the speaker, and the way the slate is left to its natural form, and different colors and flecks in the slate just look really lovely. You just find yourself staring at all the imperfections and letting your imagination run away with you. Some more pictures there of the shots of the outriggers on the bottom of the speaker. And we'll move around to the back now. Have a quick look back there. There's the dipole port for the mid-range there, and going down to the binding post plate with beautiful high quality binding posts and solid silver jumper cables there too. Beautiful stuff, all comes standard with the speaker. Again, more textured finish there. coming back up to the dipole port on the rear of the speaker.
So as you can see, just a very, very nice speaker, beautifully finished. So that's it. That wraps up my final thoughts video and review on the Fischer Fischer SN470Ms. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you found it informative and you learned a thing or two about these speakers. I certainly did, having them in the room. They were very, very illuminating in a lot of ways. I really do find these very, very nice. Not just the look of them, but just the way they performed in my room was really good. So it's definitely a thumbs up from me. To keep everything balanced, though, of course, nothing's perfect, and nothing should be either. There are compromises in everything we do, but if we look at this speaker system in a balanced way, it really is a high quality speaker system that was performing really, really well across all of the areas that you like to judge these things upon. So thanks very much everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing that. It helps me grow the channel, and then I can get things like this into the room a lot more frequently, and I can talk to you guys about how I find these things, and we can do this as a community together and learn things as we go along. So thanks very much, and until we talk again, it's bye for now.